Aloha, Exiles. A few days back, I revisited Spectral Shield Throw, the skill everyone was so excited to play on release and so disappointed with when they actually played it. It's been receiving buffs as it struggles to become somewhat viable slash competent as a skill in general. I, being hopeful, with the new cluster jewels, thinking it could be an avenue into the viability range, ventured to play it again. And the result was somewhat underwhelming. I badly wanted it to feel strong and powerful, so I invested a lot into crafting its gear, and I bought some expensive large cluster jewels, only to find out it really just felt mediocre with a large investment. I could do endgame content, but that was if I played well, and still felt like a slog after coming off the high of better builds. I'll showcase some footage here of how it played on the endgame bosses, and if you love shield throw and think it looks good enough, then the way I built it might be for you, but I personally would not recommend this build if you're going for something overpowered or you want it to be really strong, because it felt decent, but that was with a large investment, and it really should feel better with how much I spent on gearing and whatnot. Now let's get into gear straight away. To start off with our helmet, we decided to mess around with this Berserk enchant with has reduced rage loss per second. I think I really shouldn't have done this. At the end of the day, I spent too much time messing around with trying to force Berserk into this build, and I think it caused more problems than it solved, and I think you'd be better off just getting the Spectral Shield Throw enchant that makes you get more projectiles. It really goes a long way in clearing maps. Basically for the helmet though, you basically want accuracy, you want maximum life, you want cold resistance. If you can get the minus max cold res mod on the helmet, that would be ideal. That's a Redeemer influenced mod at item level 85 on helmets. Next up, our Amulet. We basically went for crit multi, life, and some resistances, and then we had that open prefix to craft. Non-channeling skills have minus 10 to cost. This basically made it really easy to sustain our attacks more or less, having this craft on multiple pieces of gear. We also ended up throwing this into a Jorgen 2 craft. We got regen. We were hoping to get global crit multi, would have been the best case scenario. You'll see we have allocated battle cry. Again, this is something I would not recommend. Instead, I'd recommend going for Constitution or a really good life node and not messing around with the battle cry, with the war cry stuff. For our rings, we went for life, resistances, and accuracy. Also, we tried to get some additional crafts of the minus total mana cost mod, along with we were trying to craft a shaper ring for Assassin's Mark on hit. We didn't hit it. We hit a ring with some good life and accuracy, and we called it a day. Ultimately, we would have got more damage with Assassin's Mark on hit. For our belt, again, we really just went to pick up a bunch more life. You could probably get more damage out of going for a Slothless Coil here, but we really just went for life. We didn't mess around with it too much. With our boots, we went for some two-tone boots with the damage penetrates enchant, and then we just crafted on life, resistances, movement speed. For our gloves, we went with Hrimsorrow. This was just so we can convert another 50% of our fizz to cold, so we'd have 90% conversion. If you get a Hatred Watcher's Eye with 40% conversion, you don't need this. In that case, you grab a pair of gloves with life and maybe the Temple enchant or Temple mod for 50% increased damage against hits against cold enemies, stuff like that. Also, you could get a Culling Strike here, other good influence mods in the glove slot. For our weapon, we went with Ewar's Mirage. This was to give us another chain, some elemental damage with attacks, and some global crit multi. At the end of the day, this probably isn't the best in slot. I just didn't really take the time to think about it too much, and since I was stacking follow through, which is a mod that gives us more damage per leftover chain, I felt this was still a decent competitive option, especially with the fact we're Deadeye as well. For our shield, we simply bought a Colossal Tower shield. I think it has to be item level 86 or 85 to get the tier 1 armor mods, and we just spammed it with dense fossils until we got really high armor mods. We ended up hitting triple T1, which allows you to get over 3,000 armor. We also hit a shield with a double T1 and a T2, which would have been like 2,800, 2,900 armor. At the end of the day, this is pretty easy to craft, pretty cheap to craft right now because dense fossils are so cheap. You really just spam single socket resonators, dense fossils. First you quality it to 30 with perfect fossils, and then you spam dense fossils. Definitely would recommend that over just buying a shield. Buying the shields is a lot more expensive, generally speaking. Last but not least, and I definitely did not forget to go over this, was our chess piece, which basically we went for attack crit chance, we went for life, and then we threw in a crafted mod for gain life is ES. You could also just go for crafting a increased life mod on here if you don't hit the hunter increased life mod, or even crafting a resist. This thing's not really doing much for us. It's giving us about 400 flat energy shield or so. It's only kind of decent. Now that we went over gear, let's go in game to go over gem links and the supports and general playstyle of the character. Now that we're in game, we're going to go over the passive tree and the gem links. So to start off with gem links, we had a 6-link chest piece with Spectral shield throw, obviously. We linked it with hypothermia because we have skitterbots chilling enemies. We linked it with inspiration as well as elemental damage with attacks, chain support, and damage on full life. These were decent damage links. They're also nice for clear. We had, after this is 2 chains, plus we had 1 chain from Deadeye, 1 chain from our weapon, and then we had 4 additional chains from the Threshold Jewel for Spectral Shield Throw. It was a lot of nice clear because it would chain so many times. It would shoot out a bunch of projectiles. It felt pretty good, and it also was decent for damage as well, considering Deadeye gets more damage based on how many chains are left over. Next up for links, we had a dash setup. I've since taken these out and used them on other characters, but it was a 20 quality dash, a 20 quality second wind support, and an enhanced level 4 just to get really fast dashes, get the cooldown recovery speed pretty high. We had War Banner. This is basically to give us more accuracy, as well as make the nearby enemies take increased physical damage. That doesn't really matter too much because most of our damage is cold, but it was mostly for the accuracy. In our helmet, we have a portal setup along with Berserk, Enduring Cry, and Empower. This is to basically get our Berserk higher level. These gems I had also taken out, but that's what they were here. For our glove setup, we have a Hatred, Summon Skitterbots, Precision, and Enlighten. I forgot to check if it was absolutely necessary to have a level 4. I think it might have been, in which case I would recommend getting a Primsar with +1 to socketed gem craft, or get a +1 to gems somewhere else wherever you're socketing this 4-link in order to basically get a level 3 Enlighten. It could decrease the cost of doing this, or you just have to de-level your Precision so that way it takes a lot less mana and then you can fit it all in with a lower level Enlighten. Next up in our weapon we have, that's probably what I messed up. I think I'm reserving the higher Precision that's not connected to Enlighten, and that's messing up my reservation. But more or less, I don't think you really need an Enlighten level 4. We had a projectile weakness, so we would curse the boss with that, just so we could get more damage on him, along with Summon Ice Golem for more accuracy. Keep that boy summoned. He dies a lot. Kind of hard to micromanage. It might not necessarily be worth it. Frostbomb, linked to Immortal Call, linked to cast and damage taken. This means whenever they would hit us, we would pop some Frost Bombs up, as well as Immortal Call as kind of somewhat defensive setup. I might honestly recommend dropping this extra precision, obviously, moving the Frostbomb over here so you can manually cast it as the boss is summoning, and that way you have more reliable extra damage penetration with cold. For our flask setup, we have a life flask, a defensive flask here is what I'd recommend. I had a mana flask here, but I didn't need it. I forgot that I had crafted these things on here, so the mana cost is not high at all and we can continuously cast, so really you can use whatever flask you want here. I'd recommend a defensive one. We had a Bottled Faith here. It's on another character now, so this is just a stand-in for Bottled Faith. We have a Diamond Flask with Remove Curses, and we have a Quicksilver for speed. Pantheon, we basically want stun immunity. You can also get the extra Pantheon powers basically so you can get basically a semi-immunity to freeze, I guess, if you've been frozen recently. Along with, we use Rythotha to just basically keep our life flasks up, because if there was long engagement and we run out of life flasks, we, for the most part, would die without those to be our sustain. Now let's go over the passive tree real quick. We chose Deadeye for the additional chain because we were building into this follow-through node, which gives us 15% increased damage for each remaining chain, as well as Deadeye also scales similarly, where it gives 10% more damage for each remaining chain, as well as 1 additional chain. So that's why the arbitrary reason why we chose Deadeye. We also get some good things like Gathering Winds, which gives us 20% basically action speed. Is a very powerful node, one of the strongest in the game, along with Far Shot, gives us more projectile speed. This one's only kind of okay. It does a decent amount more damage when you're farther away hitting enemies. It's okay. We have Rupture as well as kind of our last one If you did full fizz conversion, you probably would want to go for fast and deadly for the accuracy. I chose rupture because I still had some fizz, so basically I could always pretty much keep bleed uptime 100%, which would basically give us 40 crit multi, 80 crit chance, and while mapping, it gives 30 life when you hit a bleeding enemy. It's pretty nice for sustaining your life pool as well. Now looking over the tree, we basically were going for all the cluster nodes here, you can see, because I really wanted to stack a lot of these follow-through nodes along with some other good things like repeater, which you can get on the projectile gems for some decent damage. And so I ended up trying to go for some funny things with Nature's Patience and Secrets of Suffering. The long of the short is this was good for single target if we stood still, but it made the gameplay really annoying. You'll see how these vines constantly attach to me. They make it like you can't really move around until you have to dash to get them off you. So if it's kind of awkward in your hideout, it's really annoying to deal with. Although it was probably more damage, it made me a little bit tankier when I was standing still. Ultimately, I'm not sure I'd really recommend this just because it was really annoying to play with. Unless you get something that counteracts the vines like Stampede or something like that. Next up, we have Secrets of Suffering. This basically made it, instead of chilling, we would inflict brittle because we're already chilling enemies with our skitter bots. I would say this is a pretty good damage boost, but it's less satisfying while mapping because you're not creating all these shatter explosions, which are a lot more fun than just kind of the brittle effect, which was pretty much nothing. They kind of would make them like this faint blue color, and then nothing really would happen on the kill effect, so it felt kind of lame while mapping. It was probably more damage on bosses, but ultimately, I don't know if I'd go for this. You could probably rather go for something like getting a bunch of Fettle life jewels. One of the main problems with my build was I didn't have enough life, and you could fix this by going for Fettle life jewels on these clusters. Probably not going for this last cluster. You save a lot of passive points here, get a lot more life on these nodes here, as well as picking up some other decent nodes around here and here and here, and you would be fine on damage as well as being a lot better on life. So for large cluster jewels, we had gone for Vengeful Commander Blanketed Snow on the travel nodes. These were really expensive. They're like 4 to 5x a pop because they're best in slot for the Guardian builds for a lot of them. So it cost us a lot, and the reason we did this is because the shield nodes at the time could not roll a suffix notable, so they could never have 3 notables. Fortunately, right after my build finished, after I was done playing it, they patched this, so now I'd probably recommend going for Gladiatorial Combat, which will give you like 80% increased damage with 3k armor shields, and there's some other good nodes there on the shield cluster jewels, and that way you can have 3 decent nodes, and you can maybe spec towards getting all of them, rather than what I did here, which was forced to go to a different cluster jewel, so that way I could get 2 decent nodes on travel nodes. It'll be a lot cheaper and probably maybe be even better damage as well. I think that pretty much covers the passive tree. I'll link a path of building. It's not going to be completely put together, but it's going to be okay, I guess, in terms of hopefully it'll give you a good idea of what I did for the passive tree. I'm not sure I would quite recommend the route I took. Like I'm saying now, I'd probably go for 1 less cluster here, save a lot of nodes here, get a lot of Fettle jewels out here in the clusters, and all of a sudden you have a lot better life pool, as well as there's still a lot of decent damage options you can pick up, like Fangs of Frost I didn't pick up. I didn't pick up Primeval Force. I didn't pick up this cluster here, Force of Nature, with the life cluster down here. There's a fair amount of decent clusters still by. I didn't pick up Precise Interception. There's a lot of decent clusters still around that I would recommend going for rather than what I did here, and you'd have a lot better life pool. That's kind of wraps up the passive tree, the gear selection, the flasks. I'm sorry this build is kind of a dud. I really wanted it to be a good one. I wanted it to be a lot of fun, but ultimately the way I built it and how shield throw is currently, it didn't feel great, so I'm not sure I can strongly recommend it. But here's the video anyways, in case somebody's curious to still do shield throw, because it's an ability they love. I mean, I like that ability I like that ability a lot. It's a lot of fun for me, that's why I made it, but ultimately it still kind of feels like it needs some love to get in a stronger place, considering the gear investment I had on this character. Also, one last thing I should probably mention, definitely get a Divide and Conquer. It's mandatory for shield throw, more or less. It gives you 4 more chains. It makes you do more damage. It's pretty important for the shield throw builds. It's one of the buffs they made on shield throw when they released it, and it sucked, and I think the next league they gave us this threshold jewel to make it not so horrible. So anyways, that's the key elements of the build. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and You guys have a good one. Oh, I forgot to mention real quick. I use Val Breach at the end there, just basically to get more chains on a boss. So I drop a Val Breach, and that way there would be more mobs in the thing. So that way I'd get multiple hits out of my throws. So it would hit, I'd throw it at the boss, it'd hit the boss, and it'd bounce over and hit like one of his minions and bounce back and hit him. That was the main reason for Val Breach. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it felt decent for single target on bosses, except when it got me killed because I got overwhelmed by the Breach mobs. That's it, guys. You have a good one.